Lewis Hamilton has made F1 history after securing his 7th title win to match Michael Schumacher's record. This has caused fans to speculate if Hamilton is the best F1 driver of all time, or if one of the gladiators of the 50s and 60s should claim that title. In this video, we're going to try and narrow that list down to the best drivers from each of the 7 continents. Shout out to football channel HITC7s for coming up with this video. Now, you might be wondering why we're doing this video, as it's very hard to compare drivers from different eras. For example, nowadays, drivers have more opportunities to score points. Next year, there will be a record-breaking 23 races. In 2015 and 2005, there were 19 races, but back in 1965, there were just 10. Hence, for this list, we're not just looking at the statistics, we're also going to judge on influence, personal growth, and what they've brought to the sport as drivers. Asia. For a continent so big, it may be a surprise that there haven't been more drivers from Asia competing in F1. However, it's worth pointing out a few facts. In 2015, former British racing driver David Hobbs revealed that Europe was effectively the training ground for F1 drivers, and for a driver to make it to F1, they really have to move and compete in Europe to have a shot. Similarly, compared to the likes of the UK, some of the countries, for example in East Asia, do not have the motorsports heritage, and thus not invested in the infrastructure of karting track. This has severely diminished the numbers that make it to F1. Japan is somewhat an exception to this rule, having produced a total of 20 F1 drivers, of whom 17 took part in a race. Number 1 spot for me goes to Kamui Kobayashi. You could always count on Kobayashi to provide an entertaining race, whether that be for Toyota in 2009 or Sauber between 2010 and 2012. We won't mention 2014. He was so motivated to push himself and his car to the limit. One of his trademarks was that he took no prisoners, giving some big names a run for their money in races and by completing some ballsy moves. While he was awarded for his efforts with a 3rd place podium at the 2012 Japanese Grand Prix, in my opinion he was a talented, underrated driver who deserved a seat for much longer than he had it. Notable mentions in this category also go to Thai British racing driver Alexander Albon, Japan's Takuma Sato, and India's Karun Chandrak. It's also worth keeping an eye on F2 driver Yuki Tsunoda for the future. United States. Hopping over the Pacific Ocean, we land in the Americas. There have been a number of talented North American F1 drivers in the past and present. This includes Sergio Perez, Phil Hill, and Dan Gurney. But sharing the top spot are Mario Andretti and Gilles Villeneuve. Mario Andretti makes this podium thanks to his versatility, speed, and bravery behind the wheel. He's the only driver who has won the Indianapolis 500, Daytona 500, and the Formula One Championship. He was also extremely influential to Lotus's return to the front of the grid, helping to develop the car in 1976. On a completely different level is Gilles Villeneuve. Gilles is an icon of Formula One. He always drove the car to the absolute limit of its ability, often hustling results in cars that were nowhere near good enough to be front runners, and his attitude of never give up puts him easily on this list. A special mention should also be given to his son Jacques, who showed his competitive edge the moment he stepped into an F1 car. South America. South America is considered home to some of the F1 greats, including Juan Pablo Montoya, Nelson Piquet, and one of my favourite drivers, Felipe Massa. But ultimately, 2 F1 drivers stand out, with some not only considering them to be the best in the continent, but also the greatest drivers of all time. We start with Juan Manuel Fangio. The Argentine raced in F1 for an impressive 7 seasons and won the championship not once, not twice, but 5 times. Famed for his stamina, Fangio won his last title at the grand age of 46, having only entered racing in Europe at 38. It's an understatement to say Fangio was an all-rounder. He was simply brilliant at everything he put his mind to, and according to his colleagues, a gentleman from day one. Equally as iconic is Ayrton Senna, who captured fans' attention with his charismatic and compelling personality. The Brazilian consistently pushed himself to the extreme limits, creating breathtaking battles on the circuit. His risk-taking paid off and he was rewarded with 3 Drivers' World Championships. While his F1 dreams ended early following his tragic death in Imola, he continues to inspire people across the globe, making him one of the most influential figures in the history of sport. Africa. No races have been held in Africa since 1992, and unfortunately to this day it remains an underrepresented continent. The only recorded African to win a Formula One championship is Jody Scheckter. The South African had rather the transformation during his F1 career, from being branded as a wild man to curbing his aggressive style and securing the title in 1979. His headstrong personality certainly matched his headstrong driving, but following Ken Tyrrell's mentorship, Scheckter developed from wild to wise and focused on finishing races and collecting points, a strategy that saw him win against his Ferrari teammate Gilles Villeneuve in 1979. Australasia. While Daniel Ricciardo, Alan Jones and Mark Webber could be named as being among the best drivers from Australasia, there's really only one man who can take the title: Jack Brabham. Brabham had the rare quality of being able to understand the intricacies of an F1 car and started with Coopers in 1958. The Aussie was vital to Sir Stirling Moss's success after convincing Coopers to change to a rear engine over the heavy front-engined F1 cars seen on the grid. But in 1959, it was Brabham's time to shine, as his consistent high placings saw him beat Sir Stirling Moss for the title win. The following year also proved to be victorious for Brabham, as he completely dominated the race series and won consecutively in 5 races out of 9. His next Constructors' win would come 6 years later at the age of 40 in a car of his own make. First appearing on the grid in 1962, over the years it became more competitive, culminating in his title win in 1966. Brabham remains the only F1 driver to become a champion in his own car. Europe. Trying to decide what European driver would take the top spot on this list would be impossible. You've got legends such as Sir Stirling Moss, Jim Clark, Niki Lauda and Graham Hill. There's also record breakers like Alain Prost and Fernando Alonso. While they all deserve the top spot, there are 3 European drivers I want to focus on. Someone who has spent an unprecedented time at the top is Michael Schumacher. Making his F1 debut with Jordan in 1991, Schumacher gave the first hint of his F1 brilliance by qualifying 7th. He would then move on to Benetton for 4 seasons and winning 2 world championships. But Schumacher's true dominance would be revealed in 1996 as his relationship with Ferrari began, and by 2000 there was no stopping him as he won 4 successive titles. Though his racing style was sometimes questioned, Schumacher had an exceptional talent and was purely dedicated to the sport. The second driver is Lewis Hamilton. As the 2020 season draws to a close, Hamilton has secured the all-time records for most wins, podiums, points, races led and pole positions. He's also matched Michael Schumacher's record for most championship wins, earning his 7th in Turkey this year. Besides his amazing achievements, Hamilton is an incredible role model. He has been a prominent figure in the Black Lives Matter movement, speaking out often on the horrific death of George Floyd. And being the first black driver in F1, Hamilton has pushed to increase diversity in the sport and encouraged his fellow colleagues to take part in end racism campaigns. Hamilton has also taken on a more environmentally conscious lifestyle, having been a vegan for several years and speaking publicly over plans to help make F1 carbon neutral. It's likely Hamilton will remain at the top of his game for many years to come. I wanted to finish this video with someone who really changed the sport for the better and is a prime example of standing up for what you believe in. This man is Sir Jackie Stewart. During his time in F1, Stewart was hard to beat on the track, setting a strong precedent with 27 race wins and 3 championships. But in his 11 years racing for the Formula 3, 2 and 1 series, Stewart witnessed 57 of his competitors die. Recognising the lethal danger of the sport, Stewart fought to reform safety. But he faced tough criticism, with many suggesting he was trying to strip the tough man image from the sport. Nevertheless, Stewart pushed on to ensure drivers had full face helmets and seat belts, as well as placing proper medical staff at Grand Prix and campaigning for safety barriers and further runoff areas. His work to make the sport safer has undoubtedly helped save many lives. As you might know, there have been no F1 drivers from Antarctica, and it's unlikely there ever will be. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my choices. Make sure as well to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more controversial opinions in the future. Until next time.